Good morning. It is March 28th, 2026, and we are on our way to the Link Light Rail two-line opening across Lake Washington. We are at the Bothell Park and Ride at 7:44 in the morning to catch the 522, which will take us to Roosevelt Station in northern Seattle. Once we reach Roosevelt Station,
This is the
we will
last stop.
transfer
All
to the
passengers should be boarded at this
67,
time.
which will get us into the University District, where we transition to Route 48. Route 48 will get us to Judkins Park Station, which is where the grand opening event for the light rail event is taking place. However, I was unable to get in the line at Judkins Park Station because it was so long, so I ended up jumping on a bus to International District Chinatown Station, where I got on one of the first trains to head east across the lake.
I'm gonna DM him real quick.
International District Chinatown Station is the last station in the Seattle Transit Tunnel. This tunnel was built way back in the late 90s for buses, with the plans to upgrade it for light rail in the future. And from 2009 until 2019, link trains and buses used this tunnel, and this portion of the tunnel that we're passing through right now used to be the bus layover area. As we exit the tunnel, we emerge onto a new overpass specifically for the two line, which will get us onto I-90 heading east towards Bellevue and Redmond. We also get great views of both Lumen Field and T-Mobile Park as we enter this flyover.
Yeah, sure. Always have to the window. They're nice. Yeah.
This is talking.
Including us.
Your life story.
The first station that we arrive at heading east out of Seattle is Judkins Park Station, which is where I intended to start this journey today. But as I mentioned, the line was so long that it was impossible to get in line without having to wait for multiple hours just to get on the trains. Judkins Park Station, kind of like downtown Bellevue, is half elevated and half below grade. It To enter the station, you can either head up from Rainier Avenue or down from 23rd Street, and the platform is in the middle. It's a median station in the center of Interstate 90, as is the other station on this new extension. Highway median stops are typically not good for rapid transit networks, but considering there isn't much around these stations, it's not a huge issue. And running along freeways allows trains to run at higher top speeds.
Don't do it.
I plan to do a complete station review for Judkins Park and for the new Mercer Island station later this year, so stay tuned for those videos. Heading out of Judkins Park Station, we almost immediately enter the West Portal Tunnel just before we arrive on the floating bridge. Exiting the West Portal, we descend, the tracks descend down, and we are officially on the I-90 floating bridge. This is one of two bridges on Interstate 90 that cross Lake Washington. This one is the newer bridge and carries the link tracks as well as the westbound lanes of Interstate 90. The bridge you can see out the window of the train is the Lacey B. Murrow Bridge, which was the original floating bridge on Lake Washington and carries the eastbound lanes of Interstate 90. Neither of these bridges are the longest in the world. However, the longest floating bridge in the world is not far away. It's only a few miles north on Lake Washington, where the Evergreen Point Bridge spans Lake Washington, carrying State Route 520. Thank goodness it was such a clear day for this event, as it gave us great views across the lake in all directions. Unfortunately, we couldn't see Mount Rainier because it was obscured in clouds.
Feel the speed of cars going past you. We all get together Saturday night.
We're now exiting the floating bridge and entering the East Portal Tunnel, which will take us into Mercer Island. Mercer Island is another highway median stop along this new extension. It is the second of the two stops and had a lot of opposition from residents of Mercer Island who are very wealthy and very anti-transit because it allows people that they don't approve of to come into their neighborhoods potentially. However, Mercer Island did not win any fights that it may have made and was unsuccessful in preventing a station to be built on their island. Right next to this station is the Mercer Island Park and Ride, which will connect you to two other Sound Transit bus routes, as well as a couple of King County Metro routes. When the fall redesign for buses is implemented this coming September, then one of the Sound Transit bus routes that connects here, which is the 550, will be permanently terminated, as the light rail covers much of the same route in much less time. It's unfortunate that the 550 will be terminated, as it gave transit riders another option to commute between Bellevue and Seattle. However, it's understandable why they are terminating it, as the light rail can carry many more people much faster than a bus can.
What Bellevue stuff do we need? South Bellevue or? Yeah. So next one.
In my previous video about the Federal Way Link extension, I was able to tour all three stations along that extension. However, due to crowds at Judkins Park and Mercer Island, I wasn't able to get great footage, so I apologize for that. However, I will be creating full station reviews later this year for both of those new stations along the 2 line, so stay tuned for that. In addition to the station reviews for Judkins Park and Mercer Island stations, I will also be creating an entire playlist of videos specifically about touring all of the Link Light Rail stations in greater detail, as well as the Sounder stations, possibly.
Open name for them?
Heading out of Mercer Island, we cross the East Channel Bridge, which gives us one final glimpse of Lake Washington before we enter familiar tracks in Bellevue. The flyover that we are now on will connect us right into South Bellevue Station, which was the previous terminus of this light rail line. From South Bellevue, it's familiar tracks up into Redmond. Getting off at South Bellevue, we turn around and head back to get our stamps at the other stations. In case you're unfamiliar with the stamps, every time there is a new extension to the Link Light Rail network, they have what they call a Discover activity, which basically you get a map of the new extension, and attached to the top of your map where you can collect stamps is a little ticket at each new station along the route. And if you collect all your stamps and return wherever they tell you to return it, in this case it was Judkins Park Station, by a set time, your ticket will be entered into a raffle to win various prizes. The raffle is only open, I believe, to the first 1,000 riders who turned in tickets, and the first 500 possibly. I don't know exactly the number, but the first bunch of people who turn their tickets in usually win a free hat that is sponsored by the line. I did not end up winning a hat, but I did buy one before I got on the trains, as well as a new hoodie and crew neck. I believe one of the other prizes you could win that I've heard people mention was a free round trip on Alaska Airlines.
Please keep priority seating available.
They can put out their hand like, that's what my dad
We are now crossing the East Channel Bridge again, going back into Mercer Island. Arriving at Mercer Island Station, we will exit the train to go get our Discover stamp. as it was opening day for this line, the trains were absolutely packed. Thank goodness that they were running 3-car sets, otherwise they wouldn't have had the capacity they needed for that day. In fact, it would have been better if they had run 4-car sets, but I've heard some people say that Sound Transit doesn't have enough light rail vehicles to accommodate 4-car trains on both the 1 and 2 lines, which I think is inaccurate, as they have like 240 some odd vehicles, I believe, which to me seems like more than enough to accommodate 4-car trains on both lines at all times. Hopefully, they continue to run 3-car trains on the 2 line at a minimum. And hopefully when Sound Transit orders its next batch of light rail vehicles, they will be able to run the equivalent of 4-car trains on all lines. The next series of trains will be double the length of a current light rail vehicle. The current light rail vehicles that Sound Transit owns are 95 feet long each, and the new trains would be 190 feet long each. This means that one of the new light rail vehicles that Sound Transit is planning on purchasing within the next decade will be twice the length of a current light rail vehicle and will have much more capacity in them, which gives me hope for being able to run basically the equivalent of a 4-car train on every line from here on out, as that will round the total number of light rail vehicles up to 460 in Sound Transit's fleet.
Please stand behind the yellow line and allow other passengers to exit before boarding.
Or what they could do is they could move, sometimes they could they're planning to get a whole new tunnel, I guess. They would go up to South Lake Union in Midtown or whatever. Just up there. I don't know what the long last would be. Why don't they extend them? Oh, finally, this train's here.
We're now back at International District Chinatown Station after we've turned in all of our stamps, and we are now heading up to Linwood to ride the trains from end to end. I want to thank you all for watching this video. Next week we will be riding the 2-line from end to end in both directions.